My parents made me cancel my wedding because they didn't like my fiancé, then supported my sisters, and the part that still unthreads me is how quiet the house got after they said the sentence that ended a year of planning: "We can't give our blessing." I'm Noah, the man who believed permission wouldn't matter, right up until I learned the way love gets audited when parents are holding old ledgers. You'll hear Leah too, because she's the one I wanted to stand across from with a room full of witnesses and a knot in her laugh, and she's the one who learned to breathe without borrowed air when mine ran thin. If you've ever watched a promise get folded into an envelope and left on the kitchen counter, you know the sound I'm talking about: paper, then nothing, then a clock that suddenly thinks it's a judge. It started politely. That's how a lot of damage does. My parents invited us for dinner: roast chicken, candles, the good plates that mean someone is about to attempt diplomacy. My mother had printed an agenda as if we were a board. "We want to talk about concerns," she said in the tone nurses use before they check a stubborn wound. Beside her, my father held a pen like he meant to sign off on my adulthood when it met his criteria. Across from them, Leah sat up straight with the spine of a person who was raised to be respectful and had slowly learned how to be free. "Concerns," I repeated stupidly, because echoing buys you 3 seconds to decide whether to be brave or charming. "Leah's work," my mother began, and I felt Leah's hand slide from my knee to my wrist like she was guiding a plane. "It's unstable. Writing is unstable." "My contracts are stable," Leah said, calm. "I've had 4 in a row and just landed a 5th. I make more now than I did when I taught full-time." My father, who has never forgiven the concept of freelancing, frowned thoughtfully. "We just want assurance," he said, which is the word people use when they mean control. "And what is it you'd like assurance of?" I asked, knowing but asking because formality is my last line of defense when everything inside wants to shout. "That you won't put yourself in a difficult position right out of the gate," he said. "That you won't be rescuing anyone." "I'm not a rescue," Leah said, soft, with the authority of a person who has been misnamed before and survived it. The rest was the list: her parents divorced, her brother in and out of jobs, her apartment tiny, the city expensive, our venue performative. My mother used the word fit a lot, like I was a suit and Leah was my shirt and she didn't like the pattern. Then she laid the last card on the table: "If you insist on this timeline, we can't support it. We won't attend." My jaw did that thing it does when it forgets its hinges are not made of theology. "Is there someone you want me to marry?" I asked, which was not helpful, but the sarcasm came bundled with the adrenaline. "Noah," my father warned, the warning that means remember who used to own your curfew. Leah reached for her water and set it back down untouched. I could see her thinking about the vows we'd written, the part about choosing each other in rooms that aren't designed for us. She stood up, not theatrically, just fully. "Thank you for the meal," she said. "I'm going to head out so you can talk to your son without having to be polite to me." She touched my shoulder on the way past, like a blessing and a dare. "Call me," she said to me alone, in the voice that had been home since the day we got locked out of mine. When she left, my mother's face slackened with relief, which hurt more than any sentence had. "She is not our person," she said. "You're romanticizing difficulty." My father spoke into the space. "This is a life decision, son. It should be made with clear eyes." Here's something I learned about myself that night: I'm less brave than I hoped and more honest than I've ever been. "I love her," I said, and it sounded like something a teenager would say, but I'm 36 and my wrists still remember the heft of that truth. "I love her, and you are asking me to choose between the people who taught me how to make a promise and the person I promised to make a life with." "You're not married yet," my mother said, meaning there's still time to return the suit. So we cancelled. Not because they told us to, but because I couldn't stand the idea of Leah walking down an aisle lined with empty chairs where my parents should be sitting, my mother's absence a kind of performance art. We cancelled because I couldn't afford the venue without the money my parents had promised and because pride is a poor loan officer. We cancelled because I thought postponing would make everyone behave. We boxed the invitations we'd never send and put the boxes under our bed like ghosts that needed somewhere to sleep. We called the vendors and made the apology a duet. The florist was kind. The photographer was sad in that specific way artists are when they know the light they wanted to catch will now happen somewhere else. The bandleader said we could apply our deposit to future happiness, which is the kind of corny that makes me fond of strangers forever. The day after we cancelled, my mother sent a text I read 3 times before responding. "Thank you for taking our concerns seriously," it said. "We can revisit in a year." She added a heart, the one people put on condolences and babies. I wrote back exactly 3 words, "We'll revisit us." I thought postponing would be the worst of it. Then my sister announced her engagement. If life were a play that needed a villain, it would be easier to say my sister Tessa is that. She isn't. She is chaotic good with a tendency to narrate her choices into morality. She and Caleb had been together 8 months, and he did that thing some men do where they are tall and sincere and ask your parents questions as if their opinion will teach him how to live. My mother is very susceptible to tall sincerity. My father is susceptible to men who say the word trajectory without irony. They adored him by dessert. The first time Tessa wore her ring to dinner, my mother clapped. She clapped the way people do in church when someone returns from a long trip humbled. "We're so happy for you," she said, which was, to be fair, true. Then she turned to me and said too brightly, "See? Love finds its way when the timing is right." It would have been funny if my chest didn't feel like it had a hand on it. When they announced their date 6 months away, my parents' house turned into an incubator. Swatches. Venues. Tastings. My mother learned the difference between peonies and ranunculus overnight like she was cramming for a final. My father built spreadsheets for fun. They offered to pay half. "It's tradition," my mother said, the same mouth that had told us tradition requires slow feet. I didn't tell Leah right away because I wanted to find the least hurtful version of the truth. It turns out there isn't one. I walked to her apartment with a bag of oranges because citrus seems like a reasonable apology sometimes. I said, "Tessa is getting married." She said, "Of course she is." I said, "My parents are all in." She stared at the oranges like they were seashells and we were on a beach that didn't want us. "Do you want to go?" she asked. "To what?" I asked. "To their planning," she said. "To the thing you thought would include your face." "I want to," I said. "That's not the same as wanting." "She's Saturday." She pulled her knees up like a kid who doesn't mind revealing how small she feels. "We can leave," she said suddenly. "Leave what?" "The city. The expectation. The narrative. We can go to my aunt's place upstate and grow tomatoes the size of small heads and host dinner parties where people help do the dishes and no one asks about RSVP counts for sport." The fantasy lasted exactly long enough to be beautiful. "I have to stay and see who I am when I don't get what I want," I said finally, and she nodded not because she agreed but because she trusted the version of me that tries to tell the truth even to himself. We tried to be decent. We sent Tessa a gift that felt like a blessing and not like a receipt. We showed up to a tasting because she asked for my opinion and because Caleb is actually a good listener and it's hard to hate someone who takes notes when your sister talks. We kept our faces open at the engagement party where my mother said into a mic she does not deserve, "Family is a circle," and then managed to make a circle feel like a line you had to be on the right side of. Leah held my hand with the permission we'd negotiated. 3 squeezes means I'm here, let me be here. But grief is petty and has a sense of humor, so what broke me wasn't a speech or a check, it was color. My parents' living room turned into a paint store, swatches taped everywhere. I came by to pick up a power drill and walked into a wall of dusty blue options. "It's the theme," my mother said, full of the kind of excitement she had withheld from me like medicine with side effects. "It's so us." The word us did a thing to my hearing. Leah later told me I nodded, said it's nice, and left like a man whose coat is on fire and isn't ready to say so. The week before Tessa's ceremony, my mother called and asked if we could help with a slideshow. I said yes because I still wanted to be a son more than I wanted to be a judge. Leah came over to my parents' house with me, and we sat at the kitchen table importing pictures into software my father pretended to understand. It was normal for 40 minutes. Then it wasn't. My mother came in carrying 2 boxes. "I found these," she said light. "Noah's unused invitations." We should repurpose the envelopes for thank you notes. I don't know what my face looked like. Leah reached for the boxes and took them from my mother like they'd been handed across a cliff. We'll keep them, she said very gently, like she was talking to a skittish dog. They belong to us. My mother looked caught, then defensive. I was just being practical, she said. We shouldn't waste. Leah stood there, holding both boxes against her chest like a kid in a fire drill holding the class hamster. Some waste is sacred, she said, and left the room because if she didn't, we would all get burned. Tessa found her on the porch. I watched from the window, hating that I was learning geography, which parts of this house were safe for which truths. Tessa said something small and correct, I'm sorry. Leah said something generous and impossible, I'm happy for you. They sat for a minute without performing. It was the first time since the cancellation that I felt like the family could survive us. The wedding was pretty. I'm not cruel. It was pretty in the way events are when money behaves and the people in charge of it are in a good mood. Leah and I wore the right clothes and did not invent a cough. My mother glowed with the righteousness of a woman who believes she has saved her son from himself and ushered her daughter toward destiny. My father held Caleb's shoulder during photos like anointing. Tessa looked sweet and young and full of the kind of certainty that scares me exactly as much as it used to make me brave. During the reception, when the room was drunk on ham and sentiment, the DJ called for siblings of the bride. I stood with Tessa for a photo and realized my hand was on her back the way it was when she was 7 and I was the one helping her cross streets. You're good? I asked quietly because the job of older brother doesn't retire even when the pay is bad. She nodded. Are you? She asked back. I'm learning, I said. After the cake, after the sparkler exit that made people pretend fires gentle, after Leah and I drove home in silence that wasn't a punishment, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Tonight restored my faith, it said. Good choices lead to peace. The impulse to answer with I will marry her with or without you was loud and reckless and 14. I put the phone face down. Leah sat on our couch, unpinned her hair and said, Okay. What now? Now we get small and true, I said. We make something that doesn't need permission to exist. It started with breakfasts. The Saturday after Tessa's wedding, we went to the courthouse with takeout coffee we weren't allowed to bring inside and a bag of oranges that had become a superstition. We sat on the cold steps with 6 other couples rotating through the door to a judge who said words like he wanted them to land. We watched faces come out stunned and married. We learned the rhythm. We met the clerk who told us to come early if we wanted the judge who pronounces lawful like an invitation. We didn't go inside. Not yet. We just watched until we knew that if we chose this, it would be a choice and not a flinch. The following week, I wrote a letter to my parents I didn't send. It started with I love you and I need you not to narrate my adulthood, and it ended with there are ways to be family that don't require us to agree. In between, I wrote about the day they had asked me to cancel and the way my chest learned to be a smaller room and how I was done renting. Leah wrote her own version addressed to no one. I forgive people more easily when I stop asking them to be someone else first. We read them aloud in our kitchen with the mixer running because vulnerability needs white noise. We taped them inside the cabinet door where we keep the oats. We made a plan. Not to elope to prove anything. Not to stage a wedding to win. We made a plan to marry exactly where we could afford to be fully ourselves. We called the city clerk. We booked an appointment a month out. We told nobody. We woke that morning to rain that cleaned faces. We dressed like we might bump into someone we knew and want to look like we'd meant it. We brought a notebook with our vows hand-printed and unpolished. We forgot the oranges. Leah went back for them. The judge was the one who says lawful like a promise you haven't ruined yet. When he asked if anyone objected, Leah squeezed my hand and whispered, "Let them try," and the clerk smothered a laugh. We went to breakfast afterward. Just pancakes, the kind that collapse on themselves when you drown them in butter, and coffee that tastes like adulthood without a supervisor. Then we went home and called our parents. I called mine first. My mother answered with the excitement of a person who enjoys being in the loop. I didn't give her time to spin the web. We got married, I said. At the courthouse. This morning. Silence is a lousy judge but a great stenographer. It recorded the next 5 seconds before my mother's inhale landed. Congratulations, she said, and the words sat on a seesaw deciding which side to pick. I wish we could have been there. She did not add to stop it. My father got on the line and said, Is she there? Put her on. His voice had a weight I hadn't heard in a year. Leah took the phone and said, Hi, Mr. Abramson. He said, It's David, and if you've ever grown up in a house where first names are permissions, you know how quickly a hallway can feel bigger. We did not fight. We did not reconcile. We did something more ordinary and therefore more durable. We set a table and invited the next day to sit down. Tessa called an hour later and said, I love you both. Can I throw you a party as an apology for having a bigger one? Leah said yes without humoring. I said yes without caveats. We had the party a month later in our building's courtyard. String lights we borrowed from a neighbor. Paper plates that were nice without lying. A taco truck parked by the curb because apparently my love language is salsa. Jamal, who has been my best friend since we traded Pokemon cards and secrets, officiated a ceremony that was not legally necessary but spiritually correct. We've already done the brave thing, Leah whispered as we walked toward the little arch Tessa made out of copper pipes. This is the fun part. My mother brought brownies and a face trying out new muscles. My father brought folding chairs and the restraint not to assign them. People toasted with lemonade. Someone's toddler screamed during my vows and it felt like a blessing. I understand now that I am older than my capacity to be annoyed. My mother stood up at the end when people were packing Tupperware and said, I wasn't kind. I thought withholding love would make you choose smarter. It made you choose smaller. She looked at Leah. I'm sorry I mistook the work of a life for the mess of a person. Leah hugged her like someone who understands the difference between absolution and attendance. I exhaled so hard my bones chimed. This is the part where I could make it clean. It isn't. A month later my mother sent a link to a house she thinks we should buy, and I told her we are not in the market, and she sighed the sigh of someone who believes windows close themselves. 6 months later, Tessa got into a fight with Caleb about a dog they adopted too early and she called me crying and it complicated nothing and everything. My father still says trajectory like he invented it. Leah still submits invoices that make me sweat until they are paid. I still flinch when I see a dusty blue swatch. But here's what changed, my house is mine again. I mean the body I live in. The mind I use to measure. The hallway where I hang my coat when I come home to someone who says my name like a solution. And my parents, when they come over now, they knock and wait. They comment on the art we chose without asking its price first. My mother brings Tupperware with soup and leaves the empty containers and her opinions at the door. My father sits on the floor with Leah and talks about writing like it's carpentry, which I think is his love language, trying out a new dialect. On our first anniversary, we went back to the courthouse steps with coffee and oranges, not because we're sentimental we are, but because I wanted to check if the bench still knew us. Another couple sat where we had, hands buzzing with the electricity of deciding. We didn't interrupt. We peeled oranges and kept our joy down to a hum. On the way home, Leah said, Do you want children? The way people ask when they've built enough furniture to consider guests. I said, yes, without the usual spreadsheet. Then I added, I want them to watch us say no to things and then watch us dance anyway. She kissed my cheek with a smile that tasted like pith and sugar. If you're in the hallway I was in, listening to the clock announce your choices like weather alerts, here's the only advice I trust coming from my mouth anymore. Make a room you can afford to be loved in. If your parents won't stand in it, cut a window, let the light prove they were not the sun after all. If your sister's joy gets funded while your vows get audited, bless her anyway and keep your pen. Don't throw the oranges away. You will need something to peel on the day you realize the judge says lawful like a joke you're both in on. Learn how to say we cancelled without believing it means we surrendered. Learn how to say we married without saying we won. Learn that apology might arrive in brownies and folding chairs. Fold it into your days without pretending it repaints the past. My parents made me cancel my wedding because they didn't like my fiancé, then supported my sisters. That sentence was once my entire personality. Now it's just chapter headings in a story with better scenes. The final image I keep is this: Leah, barefoot in our kitchen after the courtyard party, her dress wrinkled where small hands had hugged it, her hair coming down on purpose, her mouth full of cake, saying, "Husband, I stole the last slice," and me with a fork in my hand and a family on the porch and the light still warm, saying, "Good, because that's the only theft I will make a life forgiving every time."